Thanks so much, Professor Clausen. It's really been wonderful to spend the day here at Elon and meet with many of you, visit a few classes, and see a lot of the wonderful, wonderful opportunities that are available to you on this beautiful campus. Nice to get out of New York for a day. So here we are, it's 2015, and Hillary Clinton is again running for president. When she ran 8 years ago, it was all about, is the country ready for a female president? Would her hormones cloud her judgment? Now, just 8 years later, there's hardly any talk about whether a woman could or should be president, only whether Hillary Clinton could or should be president. Today, pundits debate the merits of her age, her experience, etc. And that this change has taken place so fast in only 8 years signals the rapid pace of the impact that feminism has had in this country. But Hillary's biography also charts the trajectory of that change. She got a first-rate education at a women's college, but then went to a top-tier co-ed law school. She exhibited leadership qualities even while she was an undergraduate. She then went on to a law career, marriage, motherhood. Her power was enhanced by her marriage to a powerful spouse. And she was a late bloomer vis-a-vis exercising her own power. And she still meets resistance and has to prove herself in ways that men don't. Think of the optics of the Democratic debate. Bernie Sanders looks like a cuddly old grandpa. She clearly had work done and felt that she needed to before she would begin running for president as a woman in her late 60s. So feminism takes many forms, and the evolution is slow, uneven, and often originates in unlikely places. And Jewish feminism in this country is deeply influenced by these societal trends. So let's now, for the next half an hour, 40 minutes or so, dial it back 100 years to the first decades of the 20th century, where traditional gender expectations and socioeconomic realities were deeply embedded in American society, where middle-class women were socialized to aspire to marriage and family, and financial realities reinforced this as the status quo because a male breadwinner could actually single-handedly support an entire middle-class family. While the proportion of working women rose from 18% in 1900 to about 30% in 1940, only 12% of women with husbands present were in the labor force as of 1930. Also during this period, the marriage rate increased while the marriage age declined. Even if they worked in a family business or took in boarders, they saw themselves as homemakers who transmitted Jewish tradition through child rearing, food, hospitality, both in the home and through their involvement in women's organizations. At home, if they wanted to transmit Jewish traditions, they cultivated a place where they could do so, cooking traditional Jewish foods like Rugelach, which we'll get to sample, thank you so much, serving Sabbath and holiday dinners, filling the home with Jewish ceremonial objects, charity boxes, Jewish books, buying new clothes for the family for the Jewish holidays, seeing to it that the children, boys as well as girls, got a good secular education and learned the basics of Hebrew reading and Jewish living. Countless memoirs vividly recall the loving, memories of the sights and smells of the home on Friday afternoon with the aroma of chicken soup and more. With men working outside the home, often 6 days a week or more, Jewish women played a key role in molding their children Jewishly. They would have scoffed at being referred to as feminists. But think about it. They took ownership over the shape and values of their home lives. And they shaped their families in ways that would inspire their daughters to aspire to do the same and more. With career options limited by circumstance and convention, volunteer work became a crucial outlet for these women's interests, energies, and talents. At the same time, participating in volunteer activities was also a way to acculturate to the middle class, because it demonstrated to your neighbors that you didn't have to work. You could be a volunteer. Some women consciously or subconsciously sublimated their career desires by marrying what they wanted to be. That's what I looked at in the book that I wrote about rabbis' wives. They became doctors' wives, clergy wives, or, as in Hillary's case, politicians' wives. In this way, they got a platform and status that enabled them to impact the lives of countless individuals that they would not have otherwise been able to reach on their own. Dispensing advice, counseling, teaching, public speaking, role modeling, these were all avenues to influence that these women were able to get through marriage. But most women, including those women who did not marry, got involved in these volunteer women's organizations, and Jewish women followed suit, and in some ways came to epitomize this trend. They immersed themselves in volunteer work, both in women's auxiliaries to larger organizations and in standalone women's groups. Jewish women quickly formed the backbone of synagogue life, and the apocryphal, but kind of apocryphal story that is based in a lot of truth is often told that if a rabbi wanted to get something done, he would turn first to the sisterhood president and say, I need help, I need money for this, we have to do something with the religious school, help me out, we need to expand the building. And sisterhood women were right there, raising money for new buildings, intensely focused on the education of children, and also providing assistance for those in need. So just a couple of examples here. Here's the women from Sisterhood Temple Beth David, who are, these are healing art boxes that they've collated and put together to help those in need of healing. I believe that the elimination of women from such duties was never intended by our law and custom. Women were freed from positive duties when they could not perform them, but not when they could. In the final paragraph, my mother had 8 daughters and no son, and yet never did I hear a word of regret pass the lips of either my mother or my father that one of us was not a son. When my father died, my mother would not permit others to take her daughter's place in saying the Hodesh. So I am sure that I'm acting in her spirit when I'm moved to decline your offer. Even in 1916, Zold knew instinctively that she must say Kaddish herself. As a single woman without children to care for or to comfort her, she knew that she had to find her own way to claim her link with her family, and that she had to find her own place within the Jewish community. And she understood that this ritual would help her do that, just as it provided that help and comfort to men who've recited that for millennia. Her act of assertiveness, of claiming the right of women to have equal access to Jewish ritual, is a harbinger of what really became the underpinning of the Jewish feminist movement. That movement really began as a, in response to, as an outgrowth of second wave feminism in the 1960s, which began under the period of time of President Kennedy, who first established a presidential commission on the status of Jewish women, on the status of women, which led to the Equal Pay Act in 1963. That's the same year that Betty Friedan published The Feminine Mystique, which in its own way galvanized support for the feminist movement as it became a bestseller. And then the Civil Rights Act of 1964. By 1974, since here we are speaking at a university, by 1974, over 500 colleges and universities were offering 2,000 women's studies courses. That happened very quickly. I started college in 1970. There weren't women's studies courses yet. More women finished college, more women went on to earn advanced degrees, more women studied to be doctors rather than marrying doctors, and Jewish women followed suit. Then, Jewish women began to consider the implications of all of this feminist rhetoric on their Jewish identity and on Judaism itself. The Jewish feminist movement was also a logical outgrowth of the fact that Jewish women in this country had been Jewishly educated along with the boys. And finally, I would say that by the early 1970s, American Jews were pretty secure in their identity as both Americans and as Jews, and so they felt, let's say it in the reverse, they didn't feel threatened by looking closely at Judaism with their newly sensitized, feminized eyes. And when they examined Judaism and Jewish life, some Jewish women were appalled at what they found. Rachel Adler, in a groundbreaking article, which she titled "The Jew Who Wasn't There," explained that in Jewish law and practice, women were viewed as peripheral Jews in the same category as children and Canaanite slaves. But as she pointed out, women are the only ones that can't escape that status. Slaves can be freed, children grow up. Women are women. Cynthia Ozick, in her also important article, Notes Towards Finding the Right Question, explained that when she sat in her traditional synagogue and the rabbi spoke about Jews, she realized all of a sudden, after having sat there for a lot of years, the rabbi wasn't talking about her. If the rabbi said Jews are required to pray in a minyan being a quorum of 10 men, by definition, when he said Jews, he meant Jewish men. As she wrote, "My own synagogue is the only place in the world where I am not named Jew." She also understood Jewish feminism in the context of a post-Holocaust world. In her view, having lost so much and so many, Jews cannot afford to disenfranchise half the remaining Jewish population. Jewish women need and must be granted equality, not as women with men, but as Jews with Jews, because she understood that the Jewish people would need the talents, energy, and wisdom of all of its members in order to ensure Jewish survival in the post-Holocaust world. So the first generation of Jews fought for this equal access. And since the synagogue was the most important institution in American Jewish life, they fought for access to public synagogue ritual life. First of all, they wanted to be members. At that time, your husband was the member of the synagogue, and you kind of got family membership because of your husband. Well, right, with their feminist eyes, women obviously found that unacceptable and began to work hard to change those policies synagogue by synagogue. They also wanted to be counted in that minyan, in that quorum of 10 for prayer, that it should be 10 adults, not 10 men. They wanted to be called to the Torah in the synagogue and various other rituals. In 1972, Rabbi Sally Priesand became the first woman ordained here in the United States by Hebrew Union College, as a Reform rabbi. If you look at the photo, you can see that this was sort of her official ordination photo, and it's iconic now, I would say. The photo itself conveys the desire for this equality with men. Note that she's dressed like a male rabbi of the post-war era. She's dressed in a way that makes her look distinguished. She's trying to convey gravitas, legitimacy. The robe is a gender equalizer. And so the photo very much conveys exactly what women were striving for at the time. This struggle took a little more contentious debate in the conservative movement until women were accepted into the rabbinical school. You see that in the text, I guess the other side of the page from what you have. This is a manifesto that was issued by a group of women who called themselves Ezrat Nashim. It's kind of a consciousness-raising group, but they borrowed the term that is used to describe the women's section in an Orthodox synagogue. They turned that on its head, and instead of it being kind of separate but unequal, they were calling for change in the movement. You can see in the first paragraph, the women note that the Jewish tradition has now fallen disgracefully behind in failing to come to terms with developments of the past century. It states it states in paragraph 3 what is to us obvious, but sad that they still felt they needed to say this in 1972, that women are equal to men in intellectual capacity, leadership ability, and spiritual depth. And then acknowledges what we said before, that these women have been educated equally with men, so to educate women and then deny them the opportunity to make use of that education is an affront to their intelligence, talents, and integrity. This, I guess, second column there, you'll see their list of demands: that women be granted membership in synagogues, be counted in the minyan, allowed full participation in religious observances, etc. The most interesting thing about this is that you would think the most important thing that they would want is for women to be ordained as rabbis. But what word do they use? Women should be permitted and encouraged to attend rabbinical and cantorial school. So they kind of chickened out at the end. I mean, Henrietta Zold attended classes in rabbinical school at the Jewish Theological Seminary, 70 years earlier. That wasn't the issue, right? But even though they tactically decided not to ask to demand ordination, this became the catalyst that ultimately enabled that to happen. And the first conservative rabbi was ordained in 1985. Over time, though, feminists began to realize that equal access wasn't exactly what they wanted, that it wasn't enough. And again, mirroring what was going on in the larger society, Jewish women felt that they didn't just want to, mimic what Jewish men were doing in leadership roles. And they began instead to focus on what it actually would mean to be a female religious leader, to think about female spirituality. And so, one of the ways they did that, this is a prayer shawl. Generally speaking, the traditional prayer shawl is white with black stripes, sort of on the trim, and women would try to wear them and say, oh, they're too big, they're falling off, they don't fit, my shoulders aren't as wide. I want something that feels more like it would fit over my clothes, something maybe that matches my outfit, the way I choose shoes to match my outfit, right? And so you began to see a whole line of talitot in pastel colors, in different fabrics. These are silk, not wool or cotton. Similarly, some women tried to wear a typical male kippah, yarmulke, and I know myself, it doesn't work with my hair, and a lot of women felt the same way. So you see this sort of knitted thing, and in color, different kinds of colors. You would never, at that time, have seen a purple kippah on a man's head. And so they're experimenting with what that felt like. Some women found this very meaningful. Others found this to be inauthentic, kitschy, second-rate, tried it, abandoned it. Other women reached back to the tradition. At first, women were so angry at the patriarchy of Judaism that they didn't really pay much attention to so much of the tradition that really enhanced women's spiritual lives. And so they tried to do that and see if they could find old rituals and infuse them with new meaning. One example is the mikveh, the ritual bath, traditionally used by Jewish women over the millennia to immerse after menstruation in preparation for resuming sexual relations with their husbands. Denounced as sexist by feminists who found the inference that women might need purifying offensive, this idea of women immersing in a ritual bath has been reclaimed by more recent feminists as a way that allows Jewish women of today to connect with a ritual that their female ancestors found to be very meaningful, as a place that enhances their spirituality, separate from anything having to do with men. And finally, women today have found ways to reimagine what this ritual bath might be used for in ways that would bring new meaning to women. And so some of the more liberal ritual baths now are used to mark changes in status in women's lives, before marriage to a man or a woman, to cleanse themselves spiritually after suffering abuse, to mark the conclusion of chemotherapy. and other such moments. Similarly, women have developed rituals to mark significant moments in their lives, like a miscarriage or menopause, moments that never were acknowledged ritually by a Judaism that was shaped by men. It never would have occurred to them that this was something that should be marked ritually. Feminist sensibilities have also led to liturgical innovations, gender-neutral translations, adding women into the liturgy, and many other instances as well. Over time, feminism began to impact the Orthodox world as well, the Orthodox Jewish world. In 1979, the Drisha Institute for Advanced Jewish Studies opened in New York City as a place for Orthodox Jewish women to study Jewish texts at an advanced level. In 1981, Blue Greenberg wrote her feminist manifesto on women and Judaism, and she had a huge impact on the Orthodox community. Why? She was married to an Orthodox rabbi, and she promised everyone that she was just a mild-mannered yeshiva girl, and she wasn't going to do anything that was too radical. But actually, she did. She predicted that there would be Orthodox women rabbis in her lifetime, and she was right. She founded the Jewish Orthodox Feminist Alliance in 1997, and feminism has really begun to engage the core of Orthodoxy in many different ways. Bat mitzvah ceremonies, women studying Talmud, women's prayer groups, women taking a gap year to study in a yeshiva in Israel, something that was routine for teenage Orthodox boys and frowned upon for Orthodox girls. And then in 2009, Sarah Hurwitz was ordained as the first Orthodox rabbi. There was a whole debate about what to call her. There were many, many meetings in Blue Greenberg's home to figure out what they were going to call her. Should they use the word rabbi? They didn't want to offend, but they wanted to make it clear that this woman was a spiritual leader. They settled on Rabbah Sarah Hurwitz. And again, if you look at this photo, comparing it to the photo of Rabbi Sally Priesand, the photo on the left is her official photo when she was ordained in 2009. You can see that this is a deliberately non-threatening pose. She's an Orthodox woman who has her head covered, dressed modestly, with a modest gaze. She is not looking at us. All right? Her gaze is downward. She's probably teaching. The photo on the right is a more recent photo. She looks more confident. She's smiling directly at the viewer. So you can see, even in this short time, this is only 6 years, you can see the confidence of at least this slice of the Orthodox community, that it is has made the right choice. Of course, any movement for change breeds resistance, and the traditional Orthodox world, although it would deny that it is influenced by feminism at all, has actually been profoundly influenced by the Jewish feminist movement. But it's responded in the negative by sharpening the distinctions between the sexes, separating classes in school from the time children are in first grade, and increasing the rhetoric of apologetics about how wonderful the traditional role of the Jewish mother and wife is, and how that should be more than sufficient for women. This is from one of many websites that is advertising clothing that meets the criteria of ever modest dress. And this is clothing for young girls who technically don't really have to worry about modest dress quite yet. And you can also see that it's a particular kind of modest dress. This is a type of coding. This is how Orthodox Jews indicate that they're not just wearing a dress, they're wearing an Orthodox Jewish dress, this kind of like kind of body suit under a dress that's sleeveless or short-sleeved is typical. So, to wrap up here, I would say that if we look at American Jewish feminism from the perspective of the past 45 years, we can see how deeply it has impacted Jewish women, but we can also see that it's profoundly transformed American Judaism as well. The Jewish feminist movement has breathed new life into all the denominations of Judaism. It's challenged American Jews to confront every aspect of their Judaism. It's caused us to read the Bible with new sensitivities, to study rabbinic texts that are problematic and try to come to terms with them, to revamp Jewish theology, Jewish education, synagogue life, Jewish leadership. The feminist challenge inspired new creative rituals, innovations in scholarship, institution building, not only by women, but by men as well, not only concerning women, but in all aspects of Jewish life. And this revolution has also paved the way for subsequent challenges to Judaism, such as the inclusion of gays and lesbians, and now more recently, trans men and women as well. And that kind of, the pace of change in those areas is a direct result of some of the pioneering work of feminists. Only time will tell whether these innovations will take hold or not. Those pink tully tote may fall by the wayside or not. Doesn't matter. Because what has happened is that American Judaism has been revitalized as a result of this struggle. And so what we learn, I guess the main takeaway here, is not only the importance of feminism to women, but also how important it is for a religious tradition to grapple with societal forces that challenge age-old ideas. As we have seen through this kind of brief overview, such a process can be essential to keeping a religious tradition alive and vital in every generation. Thank you all.